Blood pooled around Rowan Ashford's feet as she stood swaying between the trembling cub and 8 armed rogues. The northern pack marketplace had descended into chaos. Vendors abandoned their stalls. Wolves scattered in every direction, some shifting mid-run, others grabbing their young and fleeing toward the tree line. But in this moment, all that existed was the cold calculation of survival and the unexpected choice of an Omega who'd never planned to be a hero. 5 years earlier, Rowan had stood in a different kind of circle. The Silverwood Pack headquarters in Montana, early autumn, the kind of crisp morning that made your breath visible and your hands ache if you didn't keep them moving. She'd been 19 then, lean and hungry with something to prove. The combat assessment had gone perfectly. 96 out of 100, the highest score in her class, higher than the beta males who'd trained since childhood. Higher than the wolves with warrior bloodlines going back 6 generations. The assessment coordinator had called her name with what sounded like genuine respect. Rowan Ashford, exceptional marks across all categories. Reaction time, tactical awareness, hand-to-hand proficiency. A pause. However, that word landed like a stone in still water. Your medical evaluation reveals a mitral valve prolapse. The pack physician has classified it as non-life-threatening under normal circumstances, but potentially dangerous under the extreme physical stress of combat shifting. For that reason, we cannot accept you into the guarded training program. Rowan had stood very still. Around her, the other candidates shifted their weight, not quite meeting her eyes. Some looked relieved, one less competitor for the limited positions. I can handle it, she'd said. Her voice hadn't wavered. I've been shifting since I was 12. Never had a problem. The coordinator, a scarred beta named Marcus Stone, had actually looked sympathetic. It's not about what you can handle now, Ashford. It's about what happens when you're 3 hours into a border skirmish, adrenaline maxed out, and your heart decides it can't maintain the rhythm your wolf form demands. You collapse, you die. Worse, the wolf next to you tries to protect you and dies too. Then I train harder. I learn to fight without shifting as much. The decision is final. He'd softened his tone. You're a capable wolf, Rowan. There are other ways to serve the pack. Logistics, administration, even medical support if you're interested in... I wanted to protect people. The words came out quieter than she'd intended. That's all I ever wanted. Her uncle Alpha Warren Ashford of the Silverwood Pack had found her afterward, sitting on the training yard fence staring at nothing. He was a large man even for an alpha with iron gray hair and the kind of commanding presence that made other wolves instinctively straighten their spines. I heard, he'd said, leaning against the fence beside her. I'm sorry, Rowan. You could override the decision. I could. He'd looked out at the same empty yard she was watching. But I won't. Your father was my younger brother, died protecting a convoy of civilians from rogues when you were 6. You remember that every day. Then you know what it costs when a wolf dies in service. I won't put you in a position where your heart condition makes you a liability. That's not cruelty, Rowan. That's keeping you alive. She'd wanted to argue, wanted to point out that her father had died with a perfectly healthy heart, that danger didn't care about medical conditions, that refusing to let her try was just another way of saying she wasn't good enough. But Warren was alpha. His word was law. And underneath the frustration, she knew he meant well. What do I do now, she'd asked. You find another way to matter. 5 years later, Rowan had found exactly that, though probably not the way her uncle had imagined. She worked as a cleaner for the Silverwood Pack delegation. No status, no rank, just the overlooked Omega who scrubbed floors and emptied trash while important wolves conducted pack business. The delegation traveled frequently, attending inter-pack negotiations, trade agreements, territorial disputes. Rowan went wherever they went, hauling buckets and mops and garbage bags, setting up conference rooms, and breaking them down again. Nobody looked at cleaners. That was the first thing she'd learned. You could stand 3 feet from an alpha mid-conversation, and they'd keep talking like you weren't there. State secrets, personal confessions, political schemes, all of it floated past her while she wiped down tables and collected discarded coffee cups. The second thing she'd learned, being dismissed, had its own kind of power. The Silverwood delegation was currently stationed at Crossroads Market, the largest neutral trading hub in the Northern Territories. The market sprawled across 10 acres of Wyoming flatland, a temporary city that materialized 4 times a year when the packs gathered to exchange goods information and carefully worded threats disguised as diplomatic courtesy. Hundreds of wolves from dozens of territories, all supposedly bound by the neutrality laws that made Crossroads a safe zone. Supposedly. Rowan had come to the market to pick up cleaning supplies. The delegation quarters needed restocking industrial disinfectant, paper towels, trash bags, the mundane supplies that kept official business running smoothly. She'd made the trip alone carrying a canvas bag and a requisition list background noise as always. That's when she heard the crying. The sound cut through the market noise, high and frightened and utterly lost. Rowan turned, scanning the crowd. There between 2 vendor stalls selling leather goods and preserved meats. A small figure with silver blonde fur huddled against a stack of shipping crates. The cub couldn't have been more than 6 years old. Her violet eyes were wide with panic tears streaming down her face. She wore a small dress, pale blue, now smudged with dirt from the market ground. No parent in sight, no guardian hovering nearby. A chill ran through Rowan's chest. She glanced around looking for someone who might be searching for a lost child. The market flowed around the cub like water around a stone. everyone too busy with their own transactions to notice one frightened little girl. Rowan crossed to her, keeping her movements slow and non-threatening. She crouched down, making herself smaller. Hey, sweetie, I'm Rowan. What's your name? The cub looked up, bottom lip trembling. Astrid. I can't find my mama. Okay, Astrid, that's a beautiful name. Rowan kept her voice gentle, the same tone she'd used with a spooked animal. I'm going to help you find your mama, all right? Can you tell me what she looks like? She has brown hair, and she was wearing a green dress. We were looking at the fruit stand, and then there were so many people, and I turned around, and she was gone. Fresh tears spilled over. I called for her, but she didn't hear me. Rowan took the small hand in hers. The cub's fingers were ice cold despite the afternoon warmth. It's going to be okay. We'll find her together. Can you remember which way the fruit stand was? Astrid pointed vaguely toward the market's western edge. Rowan stood keeping hold of that small hand and started walking. She stopped at each vendor stall, asking if they'd seen an adult she-wolf in a green dress looking for her cub. Most shook their heads. Some hadn't even noticed a lost child. One vendor, an older male selling hand-carved wooden toys, said he'd seen a woman matching that description about 10 minutes ago, heading toward the livestock pens. They turned in that direction. Astrid pressed close to Rowan's side, clearly terrified of getting separated again. You're very brave, Rowan said, squeezing the small hand. Walking around asking for help. That takes courage. I'm not brave, Astrid whispered. I'm scared. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you keep going even when you are. That's when Rowan caught the scent. It hit her like a physical blow. Wrong. Dangerous. The acrid smell of wolves who'd been living rough, who'd stopped caring about pack bonds or territorial laws or any of the structures that kept wolf society from descending into chaos. Rogues. She stopped walking, every instinct screaming at her to run. But running meant dragging Astrid with her, and the cub's little legs couldn't match an adult's sprint. And if these rogues were what Rowan suspected, organized hunting with purpose running would only trigger their chase instincts. Astrid, Rowan said quietly, I need you to stay very close to me, okay? Don't let go of my hand. The cub nodded, violet eyes going wider. They appeared from 3 different directions, 8 of them moving through the crowd with predatory focus. They didn't look like market visitors. They wore mismatched clothing, dark and practical, designed for function rather than appearance. Several had visible scars. All of them had the lean, hungry look of wolves who'd been on the hunt for a long time. The largest of them, a massive male with a jagged scar running from his left temple to his jaw, locked eyes with Rowan. Then his gaze dropped to Astrid. Something shifted in his expression. Recognition. Triumph. Well, he said, his voice carrying across the market noise. What do we have here? The other rogues fanned out, forming a loose circle. Market-goers sensed the danger and melted away, abandoning their stalls and transactions, creating a widening space of empty ground around Rowan and the child. The scarred male stepped closer, his eyes pale gray and cold, as winter ice fixed on Astrid. That cub belongs to the Nightshade bloodline, doesn't she? I can smell it from here. Royal Pack, Northern Territories. His smile showed too many teeth. The Alpha King's heir, if I'm not mistaken. Ice flooded Rowan's veins. She'd been holding the hand of Theron Nightshade's daughter, the most powerful Alpha in the Northern Territories, the leader of the Pack coalition that had brought tentative peace to a region that had been at war for decades. Which meant these rogues weren't random bandits. They were Bloodfang extremists. The splinter group that had rejected the peace treaties that believed the old ways constant territorial warfare might. Makes right the strong devouring the weak were the only true wolf nature, and they'd just found a prize beyond measure. She's just a child, Rowan said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Whatever political grudge you have, it has nothing to do with her. The scarred male, their leader, clearly tilted his head. Oh, but it has everything to do with her. The Northern King killed my mate 3 years ago during his precious peace campaign. Called it a necessary purge. Called her a terrorist. His voice dropped to a growl. I call it murder, and I've been waiting a long time for the opportunity to make him understand what he took from me. Thoughts spiraled through Rowan's mind. The market was emptying fast. Whoever was supposed to be guarding Astrid had clearly lost her in the crowd. Help might be coming, but it wouldn't arrive in time. She counted 8 rogues against 1 Omega with a heart condition and no backup. The odds were impossible. Stand aside, Omega, the leader said. His eyes gleamed with red-tinged light, wolf rising close to the surface. This isn't your fight. Rowan looked down at Astrid. The cub was shaking, pressed against her leg, looking up at her with those terrified violet eyes. Rowan thought about her father who died protecting civilians he didn't know. She thought about 5 years of cleaning floors, while wolves who'd scored lower than her on every assessment wore guard uniforms and carried weapons. She thought about all the times she'd been told she wasn't strong enough, wasn't worthy enough, wasn't enough. She stepped between the rogues and Astrid. It is now. The leader moved first. He was faster than Rowan expected, closing the distance in 2 strides. She had basic combat training. Every wolf did, even Omegas. Self-defense, pack safety, protocols. The fundamentals of protecting yourself if caught alone during a rogue encounter. But these weren't training exercises. These were real claws, real teeth, real blades flashing in the afternoon sun. Rowan ducked under his first strike, using his momentum to throw him off balance. She'd learned that move during her failed guard training, use an opponent's size against them, redirect rather than resist. The leader stumbled, caught himself, came at her again. The second rogue attacked from her blind side. Rowan barely registered the movement before pain exploded across her right shoulder. The blade cut deep, hot blood soaking through her shirt. She gasped, staggered, but kept her feet. Behind her, Astrid screamed. "Run!" Rowan shouted at the cub. "Hide behind the vendors! Don't come out!" Astrid fled. Rowan heard the small footsteps disappearing between the stalls. Good, that was good. Now she just had to stay standing long enough for help to arrive. The rogues came at her as a coordinated unit. These weren't mindless animals. They'd trained together, fought together, developed the kind of tactical synchronization that came from shared combat experience. Rowan fought with everything she had, blocking, striking, using every dirty trick she'd learned from 5 years of studying fight techniques in her spare time, because she'd refused to accept that being barred from the guard meant being helpless. She managed to disarm one rogue, driving her elbow into his throat and ripping the knife from his grip as he choked. She used his fallen blade to fend off 2 more, the metal singing as it met their weapons. But there were 8 of them. 8 trained fighters against one Omega, who wasn't supposed to be able to protect anyone. The third blade caught her across the ribs, left side cutting through fabric and skin. Rowan bit down on a scream. Couldn't show weakness. Couldn't let them see how much it hurt. The fourth blade sliced into her right thigh. Her leg buckled. She caught herself on one knee, still holding the stolen weapon, still blocking the path to where Astrid had disappeared. In the distance, she could hear shouting. Reinforcements. Finally, she just needed to last a little longer. The fifth blade cut across her left forearm as she raised it to block a strike aimed at her face. Her grip on the knife weakened. Blood made the handle slippery. The sixth blade buried itself in her left side just above her hip. This time she did scream. Couldn't help it. The pain was overwhelming, white-hot and all-consuming, but she remained standing. As long as she stood, they couldn't reach Astrid. She took the seventh blade to her back just below her right shoulder blade. The impact drove her forward. Her vision started to narrow, darkness creeping in at the edges. Her pulse hammered erratically, too fast, irregular rhythm, the warning signs she'd been taught to watch for. The valve struggling to keep up with the demands she was placing on it. Through the growing shadows, she saw pack guards flooding into the market. Elite soldiers in dark armor, moving with lethal precision. The rogues scattered, melting back into the crowd, abandoning their attack now that the odds had shifted. The scarred leader made one final desperate lunge, not at Rowan at the gap beside her, reaching around her toward where Astrid had hidden, going for the prize even as his pack fled. Rowan turned, threw herself into his path, felt the eighth blade slide between her ribs, angling up toward her heart. The world tilted. Sky and ground switched places. She was falling, could feel it, but it seemed to take a very long time. She hit the blood-soaked earth with an impact she barely felt. The last thing she saw before the darkness claimed her completely was a massive black wolf, larger than any she'd ever seen, tearing into the scarred leader with absolute fury. The last thing she heard was a small voice, high and frightened, screaming for help. Then nothing. Rowan woke to voices speaking in a language she didn't recognize at first. No, not a different language. Just voices too refined, too commanding, too layered with authority to belong in any medical base she knew. She tried to open her eyes, failed. Her eyelids felt like they weighed 10 pounds each. Tried again. This time they cooperated, though everything remained blurry for several long seconds. The ceiling above her was unfamiliar. High vaulted with dark wooden beams crossing at precise intervals. Definitely not the Silverwood delegation's medical wing. That had been all white tile and fluorescent lights and the faint smell of disinfectant that never quite went away. This place smelled different. Cedar and mountain air and something else, something that made her wolf stir in recognition even though her human mind couldn't quite place it. Where her voice came out as a rasp, barely audible. She couldn't swallow past the rawness in her throat. A gentle hand pressed against her shoulder, stopping her attempt to sit up. Please don't move. Your wounds are still healing. Rowan turned her head slightly. A she-wolf in healer's robes stood beside the bed, checking monitors that looked far too advanced for a standard pack clinic. The healer was middle-aged, with kind eyes and gray-streaked hair pulled back in a practical braid. Where am I? Rowan managed. Each word hurt, but she forced them out anyway. Nightfall Keep, the Royal Medical Wing. Royal, that word echoed in her mind, trying to connect to something, but her thoughts moved like they were swimming through mud. How long? 7 days. You were kept unconscious to facilitate healing. Your injuries were... The healer paused, choosing her words carefully. Extensive. 7 days. Rowan tried to process this. She'd been brought to the Northern King's territory while unconscious. Transported across state lines, treated in facilities that were supposed to be reserved for Royal Pack members and high-ranking officials. Why would they do that for an injured Omega cleaner? The cub, Rowan said suddenly, memories flooding back. The market, the rogues, the blades, Astrid's terrified face. Is she safe, unharmed, thanks to you? The relief that washed through Rowan was so intense it made her dizzy. Or maybe that was just the medication. Either way, she let her head fall back against the pillow. Good, that's all that matters. Your pack has been notified. The healer continued, making notes on a tablet. The Silverwood delegation has been extremely concerned. Your alpha has called twice daily for updates. That seemed unlikely. Rowan was a cleaner, easily replaced. The delegation had probably barely noticed she was gone until they ran out of clean towels and nobody knew where the supply closet key was kept. Rest now, the healer advised. The Alpha King will want to speak with you when you are stronger. Alpha King, Theron Nightshade. The wolf she'd heard about but never met the leader, who'd unified the Northern Territories and forged a peace that most wolves thought was impossible. Why would someone like that want to speak with her, too exhausted to question further? Rowan let sleep claim her again. When she next woke, the room was dimly lit, night cycle. The monitors beside her bed cast a soft blue glow, and through the tall windows she could see stars scattered across a clear sky. She felt stronger now. The pain had reduced to a dull throb instead of the sharp agony she remembered. Testing carefully, she found she could shift her position without wanting to scream. Progress. She became aware that she wasn't alone. Her vision sharpened gradually in the low light. Then she saw them. 6 massive wolves surrounded her bed in a protective circle lying on the cold stone floor. Elite guards in wolf form, their eyes glowing faintly in the darkness like embers. One lifted its head as she stirred, a dark gray wolf with intelligent amber eyes that seemed to register her every breath. The others remained motionless, forming a living barrier between her and whatever threats might lurk beyond these walls. They'd been here since she arrived. 7 days of rotating shifts, never leaving her unguarded. Protection fit for royalty given to an Omega cleaner who'd thrown herself on blades for a child she didn't know. Beyond the wolf circle, a small figure slept curled in an oversized chair. Astrid wrapped in a pale blue blanket, the same shade as the dress she'd worn in the market. The cub's silver blonde hair fell across her face, one small hand clutching the blanket's edge like a lifeline. She'd stayed. For 7 days, according to what the nurses had whispered during shift changes. The cub refusing to leave except for meals, enforced rest, always returning to this chair, this vigil. Such fierce loyalty from someone so small made Rowan's chest ache. As she watched the door open silently, the wolves' ears swiveled toward the sound, but they didn't rise. They knew this presence. A massive male entered. Even in human form, he radiated raw power. Alpha, not just any alpha. The way he moved, the weight of command in every gesture, the absolute certainty that he belonged wherever he chose to stand. This was Theron Nightshade, the Northern King. He noticed Rowan was awake and approached quietly, clearly, not wanting to wake either the sleeping cub or disturb the guard wolves. Rowan tried to sit up straighter, some instinct telling her, you didn't meet royalty, while lying down like an invalid. Don't. His hand stopped her gently but firmly. His voice was deep as thunder, the kind of voice that could command armies or whisper secrets. You're healing, but you took 8 blades. Your body needs rest. 8. She'd lost count during the fight. Your daughter is safe. Rowan said, the words coming out before she could think better of them. That's what matters. Something shifted in Theron's expression. His eyes, storm gray and intense, studied her with a focus that made her feel simultaneously seen and exposed. You speak as though your actions were trivial. They were not. Before Rowan could respond, the door opened again. This time 6 wolves entered wearing armor she'd only seen in history books. Not modern tactical gear, but ancient ceremonial plate dark metal, etched with symbols that predated the pack system by centuries. The king's personal guard, the elite 6 in their human forms, now formal and imposing. They positioned themselves around the room with military precision, standing at attention. Rowan tensed. Were they expecting trouble? Here in what was supposed to be a secure medical wing. Following the guards came an elderly she-wolf with silver fur elaborately braided and decorated with small bones and crystals. She wore robes that marked her as someone of significant status. Behind her walked a middle-aged male in royal regalia, medals decorating his chest. Astrid stirred, woke, saw the assembled royalty, and immediately scrambled to her feet, smoothing her rumpled dress with small nervous hands. Rowan's mind reeled. More royalty. The elderly she-wolf had to be the Queen Mother Theron's mother, the matriarch of the Nightshade bloodline. The male in regalia would be the Lord Commander, head of the royal military. So this is the Omega who saved our little Astrid, the Queen Mother said, her voice carrying decades of authority tempered with genuine warmth. She approached the bed with the careful movements of age. I had to see for myself the wolf who showed such remarkable courage. I just did what anyone would do, Rowan whispered. Her voice still wasn't working properly. The Lord Commander stepped forward. He was a severe-looking man with iron gray hair and the bearing of someone who'd spent his entire life in military service. We're told you took 8 blade strikes, yet remained standing until help arrived. That is categorically not what anyone would do. That is what a trained warrior does, or a mother protecting her young. His eyes narrowed slightly. You're neither, which makes your actions even more extraordinary. Rowan didn't know how to respond to that. She'd never thought of herself as extraordinary, just stubborn. Too stubborn to fall down when falling meant failing someone who needed her. Theron spoke quietly, but his voice cut through the room like a blade. You should know, Rowan Ashford, that Astrid is not just any cub. She's my daughter, my heir, the future of the Nightshade bloodline. He paused. The only child I will ever have. The room tilted. Rowan had known Astrid was important, the rogues had said as much. But hearing it stated so plainly, understanding the full weight of what she'd protected, made everything feel suddenly more real and more impossible. I didn't know, Rowan said honestly. It wouldn't have mattered if I had. She was a child in danger, that's all I saw. Something shifted in Theron's expression. Not surprise exactly, more like recognition. Like she'd just confirmed something he'd already suspected. Astrid could contain herself no longer. She rushed to the bedside, violet eyes bright with tears that hadn't quite fallen. Rowan, you're okay. Despite everything, the pain, the confusion, the overwhelming presence of royalty in the room, Rowan found herself smiling. Hey, little one. Much better now. You were bleeding so much. Astrid's voice broke. I was so scared. I thought you were going to die. I'm tougher than I look, Rowan assured her, wanting desperately to smooth the distress from that small face. Theron watched this exchange with an intensity that made Rowan's skin prickle. When he spoke again, his voice was gentle in a way that suggested he didn't use that tone often. Astrid, Rowan needs rest. We should let her recover. But tomorrow I can visit, Astrid asked, looking between her father and Rowan with desperate hope. Tomorrow, Theron promised. I give you my word. Astrid nodded reluctantly, then did something that made every guard in the room tense. She climbed onto the bed, carefully mindful of Rowan's injuries, and wrapped her small arms around Rowan's neck in a gentle hug. Thank you for saving me, Astrid whispered, her breath warm against Rowan's ear. You're the bravest person I know. Tears stung Rowan's eyes. She blinked hard, refusing to cry in front of the Northern King and his entire royal court. You're welcome, sweetheart. After Astrid left, after the Queen Mother and Lord Commander departed with final words of gratitude, after the Elite Six filed out in perfect formation, Theron remained. He stood beside the bed, looking down at her with that same unreadable intensity. My daughter has been asking about you constantly, he said. Wants to know everything about the Omega who protected her, what you like, what you do, where you come from. She's made me promise to bring her to visit every day until you are well enough to leave this room. I'm nobody special, Rowan said, the words automatic. 5 years of being dismissed had taught her to deflect attention. Just a cleaner from the Silverwood delegation? You stood between my child and death. Theron's voice dropped lower, gaining an edge that suggested he didn't appreciate being contradicted. That makes you considerably more than nobody to me. The way he said it, low, fierce, absolutely certain, made something flutter in Rowan's chest. Something she had no business feeling while lying in a hospital bed covered in bandages talking to a king. When you're recovered, Theron continued, there will be a formal recognition ceremony. The Nightshade Pack owes you a blood debt. That's not a small thing. It means you're under our protection for as long as you live. It means anyone who threatens you threatens us. It means, I don't want anything, Rowan interrupted. The words came out sharper than she'd intended, but they were true. She hadn't saved Astrid expecting rewards or recognition or political favors. I know. Something that might have been a smile ghosted across Theron's face. That's what makes this remarkable. He reached out and Rowan held very still as his hand covered hers where it rested on top of the blankets. His palm was warm, callous, the hand of someone who'd trained with weapons most of his life. The touch sent sparks up her arm that had nothing to do with her injuries. Their eyes met, held. She couldn't force words past the knot in her throat as she felt the intensity in his gaze, like he was seeing past all her defenses, all her carefully maintained walls, straight through to the parts of herself she kept hidden. Rest, Rowan Ashford, Theron said softly. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, once a gesture so brief she might have imagined it. We'll speak again soon. After he left, Rowan stared at the ceiling, her hand still warm where he'd touched it. An Omega cleaner had saved the Alpha King's daughter, and now the most powerful wolf in the Northern Territories was looking at her like she mattered, like she was worth noticing. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Rowan's recovery progressed with a speed that surprised even Dr. Lena. The royal healers employed techniques she'd never encountered in standard pack medicine, a combination of ancient herbal treatments and cutting-edge medical technology that accelerated tissue repair far beyond normal wolf healing capabilities. By the 4th day after waking, she could sit up without assistance. By the 7th, she could walk short distances, though her legs trembled with the effort and the newly healed wounds pulled tight with each step. Astrid visited every day, sometimes with attendants from the royal household, sometimes sneaking in alone when she thought no one was watching. The cub would climb into the chair beside Rowan's bed and talk about everything and nothing the birds she'd seen that morning, the book her tutor was making her read, the way the cook had let her help make bread, and her hands had gotten covered in flour up to her elbows. Rowan found herself looking forward to these visits more than she wanted to admit. There was something uncomplicated about Astrid's affection, something pure that had nothing to do with rank or obligation or the complex political machinery that seemed to govern every other interaction in Nightfall Keep. Why do you clean? Astrid asked one afternoon. She was sitting cross-legged on the bed now that Rowan was strong enough to tolerate the movement. You're so strong, you should be a warrior. Rowan's smile turned sad. I tried. They said Omegas can't be warriors. That I have a heart condition that makes shifting dangerous. Astrid's face scrunched up in the particular expression of outrage that only children could achieve. That's stupid. You're braver than any warrior I know. You took 8 blades and didn't fall down. 9, actually, Rowan corrected gently. She'd counted the scars during one of Dr. Lena's examinations. 8 from the market attack, plus 1 more she must have taken that she couldn't remember through the haze of pain and adrenaline. That's even more stupid then. Anyone who says you can't be a warrior is dumb. The words settled warm in Rowan's chest, filling some hollow place she hadn't quite acknowledged was there. You know what? You might be right. Theron appeared during many of these visits. At first, Rowan thought he was simply checking on his daughter, making sure Astrid wasn't tiring out an injured patient. But she began to notice how his eyes lingered on her when he thought she wasn't looking. How he asked about her recovery with a level of concern that seemed to go beyond simple gratitude. How he listened when she spoke, really listened like her words carried weight that mattered. One evening after Astrid had been taken to bed, Theron stayed. He'd brought 2 glasses of wine, though Rowan suspected Dr. Lena would disapprove of alcohol mixing with her medications. May I? He gestured to the chair beside her bed. Of course, Your Majesty. Theron, he settled into the chair with the easy grace of someone completely comfortable in his own body. When it's just us, call me Theron. Something about the intimacy of that request made her pulse quicken. Theron, she repeated, testing the name. It felt strange on her tongue. Too familiar. Too dangerous. He handed her one of the wine glasses. She took it carefully, her hands still not quite steady. The wine was dark red rich, probably worth more than she made in a month of cleaning duties. The ceremony is planned for 5 days from now, Theron said. If you're well enough. Dr. Lena says you're healing remarkably fast, but I won't rush you if you need more time. What kind of ceremony? The Order of the Silver Star. It's the highest honor the Nightshade Pact can bestow for courage in service to the bloodline. It's only been awarded 17 times in our history. The last recipient was a warrior who held a mountain pass alone for 3 days against a rebel army. He took a sip of wine. You'll be the first Omega to receive it, and likely the first to do so for protecting the heir rather than the Alpha directly. Rowan shook her head. I don't deserve that. I just stop. The command in his voice made her eyes snap to his. Stop diminishing what you did. You don't get to decide whether you deserve recognition. I do, and I've decided. She wanted to argue, but something in his expression told her it would be pointless. When Theron Nightshade made a decision, mountains moved to accommodate him. There's something else, Theron said, leaning forward. Something I wanted to discuss before making it official. He set his wine glass on the small table beside her bed. My advisors want me to offer you a position. Something formal to honor the blood debt and ensure you're properly compensated for what you did. A knot formed in Rowan's throat. What kind of position? Astrid's personal guardian. The words hung in the air between them. Rowan stared at him, trying to process what he was suggesting. Me guard your heir. Who better? Theron's voice was quiet but absolutely certain. You've already proven you'd die for her. That's not something I can buy or command. That's loyalty that exists because you chose it. Because when the moment came, you didn't hesitate. I have no training, no qualifications. I failed the guard assessment. You have something better than training. He shifted closer and Rowan could smell him now, pinane and snow and something uniquely him that made her wolf stir with interest. You have courage that doesn't wait for permission. Strength that has nothing to do with rank or bloodline. And Astrid adores you. She feels safe with you in a way she hasn't felt safe since... He trailed off, but Rowan understood. Since her mother died. The unspoken truth that everyone in Nightfall Keep seemed to dance around. What about my pack? Rowan asked. The Silverwood delegation has already agreed to release you from service. Enthusiastically, I might add. Something dark flickered across Theron's face. Your Alpha seemed quite eager to be helpful when the Northern King expressed interest in one of his pack members. Of course Warren had. An Omega cleaner was easily replaced, and refusing the Northern King's request would have been politically stupid. Rowan tried not to feel bitter about it. This was how pack politics worked. She'd known that all her life. I don't know, Rowan whispered. This is all so much. A week ago I was buying cleaning supplies. Now you're offering me a position guarding the most important child in the Northern Territories. I know. Theron's hand reached out, covered hers where it rested on the blanket. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, the same gesture he'd made days ago, but this time it lingered. I'm not asking you to decide right now. Take time to think about it. But Rowan, she looked up, found his face closer than before. Close enough that she could see the small scar above his left eyebrow, the silver threading through his dark hair at his temples, the exact shade of gray in his eyes. I hope you say yes. The ceremony 5 days later was overwhelming in a way Rowan hadn't anticipated. She stood in the Great Hall of Nightfall, Keep before 300 assembled wolves wearing formal clothes the Queen Mother had provided. The dress was simple but elegant, deep burgundy, cut to hide most of her healing wounds, while still maintaining the dignity appropriate for a royal ceremony. The Great Hall itself was massive, with vaulted ceilings supported by carved wooden pillars that must have been ancient even when Nightfall Keep was first built. Banners hung from the walls representing every pack in the Northern Alliance, a visual reminder of Theron's political achievement in unifying territories that had been at war for generations. Rowan walked down the center aisle with her pulse hammering. Every eye in the hall tracked her movement. She recognized some faces members of the Silverwood delegation, including Alpha Warren, who'd apparently decided to attend, despite never showing much interest in her existence before. Other faces were unfamiliar representatives from packs across the Northern Territories, all gathered to witness an Omega receive an honor traditionally reserved for warriors of exceptional merit. Theron stood at the front of the hall on a raised platform, wearing formal regalia that somehow made him look even more imposing than usual. The Elite Six flanked him, standing at attention in their ceremonial armor. When Rowan reached the platform, she started to kneel. Theron shook his head slightly, stopping her. Instead, he descended the steps to meet her at ground level. Equal footing. He held the medallion in both hands, an intricate piece of silverwork, depicting a star with 8 points, each point tipped with a small sapphire ornament. It hung from a ribbon of deep blue silk. For Rowan Ashford of Silverwood, Theron announced, his voice carrying through the hall without need for amplification, who showed us that courage knows no rank, who protected the future of our pack without hesitation or thought for her own safety, who proved that honor lives in the heart, not in the bloodline. He placed the medallion around her neck. His hands lingered on her shoulders, warm through the fabric of her dress. For a moment that seemed to stretch impossibly long, they stood there close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Thank you," he said quietly, meant only for her, "for giving me back my daughter." Then he stepped back, and the hall erupted. Not applause that would have been too civilized for wolves. Instead, they howled, 300 voices rising in a chorus that shook the rafters and made Rowan's bones vibrate with the sound of pack approval. The reception afterward was less overwhelming, but more exhausting in its own way. Rowan found herself surrounded by wolves, wanting to hear her story, to congratulate her, to speculate about her future role in the Nightshade Pack. Alpha Warren appeared at one point, all warm smiles and proud declarations. "Always knew you were destined for greatness, Rowan," he said, gripping her shoulder like they were old friends instead of Alpha and rejected trainee. "I remember telling the Guard Assessment Committee that you had real potential. They didn't listen at the time, but I always believed in you." Rowan smiled politely and said nothing. Let him rewrite history if it made him feel important. She'd learned long ago that correcting powerful wolves rarely ended well. Late in the evening, she found herself on a balcony overlooking the keep grounds, desperate for air and space, in a moment without someone staring at her. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky, like someone had spilled diamonds on black velvet. The mountains rose in the distance, dark silhouettes against the lighter darkness of the sky. Hiding. She turned to find Theron approaching, 2 fresh glasses of wine in hand. He'd removed the formal regalia, now wearing just dark trousers and a simple shirt. Somehow he looked more regal this way, stripped of the ceremonial trappings. "Needed air," she admitted. He handed her a glass, then leaned against the balcony railing beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "You handled that well. I know it couldn't have been easy being the center of that kind of attention. I've spent 5 years being background noise. This is the opposite of my comfort zone. You're going to have to get used to being noticed, especially if you accept the guardian position." Rowan took a long sip of wine, gathering her courage. "Can I ask you something first?" "Anything. Why do you really want me to stay? Is it truly just for Astrid?" Theron was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the mountains. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, more vulnerable than she'd heard it before. "At first, yes. My daughter needs someone she can trust absolutely. Someone who's proven their loyalty beyond any possible question." He turned to face her, fully setting his wine glass aside. "But if I'm being honest with myself and with you, it's not just for Astrid anymore." A tremor ran through Rowan. "What do you mean?" "I mean that in the week you've been here, I've watched you with my daughter. Watched you refuse to diminish yourself as worth less than anyone else, despite spending 5 years being told exactly that. Watched you heal with a determination that borders on stubborn." His hand came up, cupping her face with a gentleness that seemed impossible from someone his size. "I mean that somewhere between watching you wake up and watching you make my daughter laugh for the first time since her mother died, I started recognizing you not just as the Omega who saved my child, but as a woman I want to know better." She couldn't breathe past the tightness in her chest. His palm was warm against her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. "Theron, I'm an Omega. You're the Northern King. The Pack would never. The Pack will accept what I tell them to accept." His voice gained that edge of command, the tone of someone who'd led wolves through war and peace and never doubted his authority to do so. "And I'm telling them that you are under my personal protection, that anyone who disrespects you answers to me directly." He leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. "Stay, Rowan, not just for Astrid. Stay because I'm asking you to. Because I want you here. Because from the moment I saw you lying in that medical bed covered in bandages from wounds you took from my child, something in me recognized something in you." "Recognize what?" The words came out barely above a whisper. "My equal." Then he kissed her. Gentle at first, careful of her still healing body, but full of something that felt like promise and possibility, and all the things she'd stopped letting herself hope for years ago. His hand slid from her cheek to the back of her neck, fingers threading through her hair. Her own hands found his chest, feeling the steady thrum of his heartbeat beneath her palms. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Rowan felt dizzy, like the world had tilted on its axis and nothing would ever be quite the same again. "Is that a yes?" Theron asked, his voice rough. "Will you stay?" Rowan laughed, the sound shaky but genuine. Yes, I'll stay." The smile that spread across Theron's face was devastating. He pulled her close again, this time wrapping his arms around her, carefully holding her against his chest. She could hear his heart now racing as fast as her own. "Thank you," he murmured into her hair. They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other, while the party continued inside, oblivious to the shift that had just occurred on the balcony. Rowan thought about the girl she'd been a week ago dismissed and resigned to a life of cleaning floors and being overlooked. That girl seemed impossibly distant now. The following 6 weeks passed in a blur of healing and learning. Dr. Lena cleared Rowan for light duty, which meant she began the actual work of being Astrid's guardian. The Elite Six trained her in royal protocols, defensive tactics, emergency procedures. She learned the layout of Nightfall Keep until she could navigate its corridors blindfolded. She studied the political landscape of the Northern Territories, understanding which alliances were stable and which were one provocation away from collapse. Cade Flint, one of the Elite Six, became her primary instructor. He was a lean wolf with dark hair and watchful eyes, the kind of fighter who relied on speed and precision rather than brute strength. During their training sessions, he pushed her hard, but never treated her like she was fragile. "You fight dirty," he observed one afternoon after she'd used an unorthodox move to pin him. "Where'd you learn that?" "Taught myself. The guard training assessment covered formal combat, but I figured real fights don't follow rules." Smart. He helped her up, brushing dirt from his training clothes. Most wolves rely too much on their wolf form in combat. They forget that sometimes staying human gives you more options. Rowan thought about the market attack, how she'd fought entirely in human form because shifting would have triggered her heart condition. "Sometimes you don't have a choice." Cade's expression shifted, becoming more serious. "The king told us about your medical situation. Said we should be aware in case you have an episode during training." "I won't," Rowan said firmly. "I know my limits." "See, that's the thing." Cade crossed his arms, studying her. "I don't think you do. I think you'd push yourself until you collapsed if you thought it would prove something." He wasn't wrong. Defensive walls slammed up anyway. "I've managed fine for 5 years. By avoiding anything that might stress your system. But you're not avoiding stress anymore. You took 9 blades and survived. That's not managing, that's luck." He softened his tone. "I'm not saying you can't do this job. I'm saying you need to be honest about your limitations so we can work around them. A guardian who drops dead from a heart attack is no good to anyone." The bluntness stung, but Rowan recognized the truth in it. "What do you suggest?" "Dr. Lena wants to run more tests on your heart." "Let her. Figure out exactly what your body can handle and what pushes you into dangerous territory. Then we train accordingly." Rowan nodded slowly. "Okay, I can do that." The test revealed something, Doctor. Lena hadn't expected. She called Rowan into her office 3 days later, tablet in hand, expression somewhere between concerned and fascinated. "Your valve is healing," Dr. Lena said without preamble. "Not just scarring over or stabilizing, actually repairing itself. The structural abnormality that's been present since birth is correcting." Rowan stared at her. "That's not possible. Hearts don't spontaneously heal structural defects." "They don't. Which is why I've spent the last 72 hours running every test I can think of trying to figure out what's causing it." Dr. Lena pulled up an image on her tablet showing a detailed scan of Rowan's heart. "The only variable that's changed in your medical history is the alpha blood transfusion we gave you to stabilize you after the attack." "Theron's blood." "Yes. Alpha blood in an omega is rare. We usually avoid cross-ranked transfusions because the biological compatibility is questionable. But you were dying, and the king insisted we use his blood specifically. He said his wolf was demanding it, some instinct he couldn't explain." Dr. Lena set the tablet down. "Whatever the reason, his blood is doing something remarkable to your system. The mitral valve prolapse is correcting. Your heart rhythm is stabilizing. In another few weeks, I think you'll be able to shift safely for the first time in years." The room seemed to tilt. Rowan gripped the edge of Dr. Lena's desk, trying to process what she was hearing. 5 years. 5 years of being told her body was broken, that she'd never be whole, that shifting would always be a potentially fatal risk. "And now, you're sure?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "I'm monitoring it closely, but yes. The evidence is clear. Your heart is healing, Rowan. You're going to be able to shift again." Rowan made it halfway down the corridor before she had to stop pressing her back against the wall as tears streamed down her face. She'd spent so long building walls around the grief of what she'd lost. The career she couldn't have, the identity. As a warrior, she'd been denied the simple freedom of shifting forms that other wolves took for granted. And now those walls were crumbling, and underneath was a hope so fierce it hurt. She found Theron in his office reviewing reports with 2 of his advisors. He took one look at her face and dismissed them immediately. "What's wrong?" He was across the room in 3 strides, hands on her shoulders, eyes scanning her for injury. "Nothing's wrong." Rowan wiped at her face, trying to pull herself together. "Dr. Lena ran tests. My heart, the alpha blood you gave me, it's healing the valve. She says in a few weeks I'll be able to shift safely." Understanding flooded Theron's expression. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, while she shook with the force of emotions she'd kept locked down for years. "I'm going to be whole," she whispered into his chest. "For the first time since I was 19, I'm going to be whole." "You were always whole," Theron said fiercely. "The valve didn't make you broken. It just made you more careful, more strategic." He pulled back enough to look at her thumbs, wiping away the tears on her cheeks. "But I'm glad you'll have this. Glad my blood could give you something back." 3 days later, Theron took her to a private clearing in the mountains far from Nightfall Keep and any other wolves who might witness what could be a disaster or a triumph. The clearing was small, ringed by pine trees, with a stream running along one edge. Snow still capped the highest peaks visible in the distance. Are you sure about this? Theron asked. He'd shifted to his wolf form, massive and black with those same storm gray eyes. Dr. Lena said you should wait another week to be safe. Rowan shook her head. I've waited 5 years. I'm not waiting anymore. She closed her eyes, reaching for the wolf that had been caged inside her for so long. The shift hurt. It always did. Bones rearranging muscles, restructuring skin, giving way to fur. But this time there was no stuttering heartbeat, no arrhythmia threatening to collapse her mid-transformation. When she opened her eyes again, the world looked different, sharper. Colors muted, but sense exploding in complexity. She could smell the pine sap, the mineral content of the stream, the unique signature of Theron's wolf nearby. She looked down at herself, saw silver gray fur where there should have been the standard brown or black, common to most wolves. The alpha blood had changed her, marked her as something different. Rowan threw back her head and howled. 5 years of frustration and grief and longing poured out in that sound. 5 years of being told she wasn't enough, couldn't be trusted with her own body, needed to stay small and safe and limited. Theron's howl joined hers deeper, resonating in her chest. Then he was running powerful legs, eating up ground, and Rowan ran with him. They raced through the forest, leaping over fallen logs, splashing through the stream, chasing each other in circles, while the joy of movement, of freedom, sang through Rowan's veins. When they finally stopped, both panting, Rowan shifted back to human form. Theron did the same. They stood there in the clearing, both naked as the day they were born, breathing hard and grinning like fools. You're fast, Theron said. Faster than most wolves I've seen. Different build. Rowan looked down at her human form, then back at where her wolf had been. Smaller, built for speed rather than power. It suits you. Theron crossed the clearing, pulled her into his arms. Everything about you suits you. He kissed her again, and this time there was less careful gentleness and more hunger. His hand slid down her back, pulling her closer. Rowan's fingers tangled in his hair, and she kissed him back with 5 years of pent-up want, 5 years of denying herself anything that felt too good because she hadn't thought she deserved it. When they finally broke apart, Theron rested his forehead against hers. I'm falling for you, Rowan Ashford. Might have already fallen. I'm not entirely sure when it happened. I think I fell the moment you said I was your equal, Rowan admitted. No one's ever called me that before. Then everyone you've met before has been a fool. They made love there in the clearing on soft grass with sunlight filtering through the pine boughs, and afterward they shifted back to wolf form and ran until the sun started setting, and they had to return to Nightfall Keep before anyone organized a search party. 2 days later, an intercepted communication changed everything. Rowan was in the training yard with Cade when Theron appeared, his expression dark. We need to talk. My office. Now. In Theron's private office, surrounded by the Elite Six and his top advisors, Rowan learned that Silas Blackthorne, the scarred rogue leader from the market attack, had sent a message. It had been delivered to the Border Patrol, carved into the bark of a tree with what looked like claw marks. The message was simple and terrifying. The ceremony was just the beginning. I'm coming for what you took from me, Nightshade, and this time I won't fail. He's planning another attack, Cade said, studying the photographs of the tree carving, probably targeting the keep directly. We increase security, one of the advisors suggested. Double the patrols, restrict access. No, Theron's voice cut through the discussion. We don't cower behind walls. That's not how we handle threats in the Nightshade Pack. He looked at Rowan. But I want you and Astrid moved to a secure location until this is resolved. Absolutely not, Rowan said immediately. Astrid stays where she's safe, but I'm not hiding while you face down the wolf who tried to kill her. Rowan, I'm her guardian. That means I stay close enough to protect her, and she's safest here in Nightfall Keep, where you have 300 warriors in defensive fortifications. Rowan crossed her arms. Besides, Silas has already witnessed what I'm willing to do to keep Astrid safe. Maybe it's time he learns what happens when I can actually shift to fight back. The room went quiet. Then Cade laughed, a short bark of approval. She's got a point, Your Majesty. We've been treating her like she's fragile. But fragile wolves don't take 9 blades and survive. Theron studied Rowan for a long moment. She met his gaze steadily, refusing to back down. Finally, he nodded. Fine, but you follow security protocols exactly. No improvising, no heroics. Understood? Understood. That night, Rowan lay in bed in her quarters rooms that had been hastily prepared for her near Astrid's suite when she accepted the guardian position and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow, she'd begin formal weapons training with the Elite Six. In 3 days, Theron had a meeting planned with the other Northern Alphas to discuss the Silas threat and coordinate a response. In 2 weeks, if Dr. Lena's timeline held, Rowan would be cleared for full combat duty with no restrictions. Everything was changing so fast. A month ago, she'd been overlooked scrubbing floors and emptying trash. Now she wore the Order of the Silver Star around her neck, trained with the Royal Guard, and shared kisses with a king who looked at her like she held the answers to questions he hadn't known how to ask. A soft knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. She opened it to find Theron standing there, still dressed from the security meeting earlier. Couldn't sleep, he said simply. Rowan stepped aside, letting him in. He crossed to the window, looking out at Nightfall Keep's grounds. I lost my mate 3 years ago to rogues. Not Silas's pack, a different group, but the same ideology. They ambushed a civilian convoy. Alara was escorting it personally. She fought like hell, saved most of the civilians, but there were too many attackers. His voice was flat, emotionless, in the way of someone who'd told this story so many times it had lost its power to hurt. By the time reinforcements arrived, she was already gone. I'm sorry, Rowan said softly. Astrid was 3, young enough that she barely remembers her mother now. Sometimes I'm grateful for that. It means she wasn't old enough to fully understand the trauma. Other times, I hate it because Alara deserves to be remembered. He turned to face her. I've spent 3 years being terrified that something similar would happen to Astrid, that I'd lose her the same way I lost her mother. And then you, this Omega I'd never met who owed us nothing, threw yourself between her and death without hesitation. He crossed the room, taking her hands in his. I need you to understand something. When I say I'm falling for you, it's not just because you saved my daughter. It's because you showed me that there are still wolves in this world who act with that kind of instinctive courage, who witness someone in danger and move toward it instead of away. I've been surrounded by political calculations and strategic alliances for so long that I'd started to forget what genuine, uncomplicated heroism looks like. It wasn't heroism, Rowan protested. It was exactly heroism, and you need to stop diminishing it. He cupped her face in both hands. Tomorrow I'm going to make an announcement. I'm asking you to be my mate, Rowan Ashford. Not just Astrid's guardian, but my partner. My equal in the eyes of the pack in the territories. Her breath stopped. Theron, the council will never accept an Omega as... I've already spoken to the council. The vote passed 8-2. Elder Helena abstained, which I'm choosing to interpret as progress. His thumb stroked her cheekbones. If you say yes, it's done. We'll announce it tomorrow and formalize the mating bond within the month. People will say you're making a political mistake, that you should choose an alpha from another pack, strengthen alliances. People can say whatever they want. I'm choosing you because you're the only wolf I've met in 3 years who makes me remember what it feels like to want something beyond duty and obligation. He leaned his forehead against hers. Say yes, Rowan. Please. She thought about the girl who'd been rejected from guard training 5 years ago. The one who'd been told she wasn't good enough, wasn't strong enough, wasn't enough. That girl would never have believed this moment was possible. But Rowan wasn't that girl anymore. She'd taken 9 blades and survived. She'd healed what everyone said was unhealable. She'd earned the respect of the Northern King and his elite warriors. She'd proven over and over that worth had nothing to do with rank or bloodline or what anyone else believed about you. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll be your mate. Theron kissed her deep and claiming, and Rowan kissed him back with everything she had. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. Thank you, he said, for saying yes, for staying, for being exactly who you are. Thank you for noticing me when everyone else looked through me. He stayed that night and they talked until dawn about everything and nothing, his plans for the Northern Territories, her hopes for what she could achieve as guardian and mate, the strategies they'd need to counter Silas's threat, the logistics of a mating ceremony that would satisfy royal protocols while still feeling genuine. When the sun finally rose, painting the mountains gold, Rowan lay wrapped in Theron's arms and thought about how impossible this all would have seemed just weeks ago. How quickly everything had changed. How terrifying and perfect it felt to be truly witnessed by someone who commanded the respect of thousands, but chose to give his heart to her. That peace lasted exactly 8 hours. By mid-morning, they stood before the full Northern Council, and the political machinery of the territories ground into motion. The announcement sent shockwaves through Nightfall Keep and beyond. Theron made it in the Great Hall before an assembly of pack leaders, council members, and representatives from every territory in the Northern Alliance. He stood on the raised platform with Rowan at his side, her hand clasped firmly in his, and declared his intention to take her as his mate. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Elder Helena Cross rose from her seat among the council. She was a formidable woman in her late 60s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, known for her conservative stance on pack traditions. Everyone expected her objection. Instead, she said, I abstain from comment on the king's personal choices. But I will say this, I've watched Rowan Ashford train with our Elite Six. She holds her own. She's earned her place here through deed, not politics. That matters. It wasn't quite approval, but coming from Helena, it might as well have been a ringing endorsement. The rest of the council followed her lead, and the hall erupted in the traditional howls of acceptance. Not everyone sounded enthusiastic, but no one openly challenged Theron's decision. That went better than expected, Rowan murmured as they left the platform. Helena's practical, above all else, Theron replied. She witnessed you fight in that combat trial. She knows what you're capable of, and she understands that tradition means nothing if the bloodline doesn't survive to carry it forward. You protected that future. She respects that. The mating ceremony was scheduled for 2 days after the formal announcement. Not the traditional month-long preparation, but Theron wanted it done quickly. Silas is still out there, he'd explained. I want our bond formalized before we have to face him. I want everyone, including him, to know exactly what you are to me and this pack. But first there was the matter of security and the looming threat. The intelligence reports came in steadily over the next 48 hours. Silas Blackthorn had been spotted near the eastern border with a force of at least 20 rogues. They were well-armed, organized, clearly planning something significant. The question was when and where they'd strike. Rowan spent those 2 days in intensive training with the Elite Six. Her heart was fully healed now, Dr. Lena had confirmed. No restrictions, no limitations. For the first time in her life, she could fight without fear of her own body betraying her. Cade worked her through combat scenarios specifically designed around defending Astrid. The ceremony will be public, he explained, moving through attack patterns while Rowan defended. 300 guests, maybe more. That's a lot of variables, a lot of potential threats. Your job is to stay between Astrid and danger no matter what. What if the danger comes from multiple directions? Then you prioritize based on immediacy and lethality. Trust that the Elite Six will handle perimeter threats. Your only concern is the air. Everything else is secondary. They ran the scenarios over and over until Rowan's muscles ached and sweat soaked through her training clothes. But by the end of the second day, she could respond to threats without thinking, her body moving on instinct and training rather than conscious decision. You're ready, Cade said as they finished the final run-through. More ready than most wolves who've trained their whole lives for this. That night, Rowan checked on Astrid before bed. The cub was already in her pajamas, sitting cross-legged on her bed with a book open in her lap. Can't sleep, Rowan asked from the doorway. Astrid looked up, smile bright. I'm too excited about tomorrow. You are really going to be my new mama. Rowan crossed to the bed, sitting on its edge. I'll be your guardian and your father's mate. That makes us family, yes. Good. Astrid set the book aside, suddenly serious. I don't remember my first mama very much. Just little things. The way she smelled. How she used to sing to me at bedtime. Dad says she was brave. I'm sure she was incredibly brave. Are you scared? Astrid asked. About tomorrow. Rowan considered lying, giving the easy reassurance that adults often offered children. But Astrid deserved honesty. A little, it's a big change, but I'm also excited. Your father is a good man, and you, she tapped Astrid's nose gently, are the best part of all of this. Will you sing to me? Astrid's voice went small, like my mama used to. A lump formed in Rowan's throat. She didn't know what songs Alara had sung, but she remembered the lullabies her own mother had offered before she died. Old pack songs passed down through generations. She started singing soft and low, and Astrid's eyes drifted closed. When Theron found her an hour later, she was still sitting on Astrid's bed, the cub asleep with her head on Rowan's lap. She asked me to sing, Rowan whispered. Theron's expression went soft in a way she'd only witnessed when he looked at his daughter. Alara used to do that every night. He crossed to the bed, carefully lifting Astrid and tucking her under the covers. Thank you for being what she needs. She makes it easy. They left Astrid's room together, walking through the quiet quarters of Nightfall Keep. Most of the pack was asleep, though guards patrolled at regular intervals, their presence reassuring in light of Silas's threats. Tomorrow, Theron said, stopping outside Rowan's quarters, everything changes. You'll be my mate, part of the royal bloodline. There's no going back from that. I don't want to go back. He pulled her close, kissing her with a tenderness that made her chest ache. Good, because I'm not letting you go, not ever. The mating ceremony took place in the Great Hall at sunset, golden light streaming through the tall windows and painting everything in warm amber tones. The hall was filled with guests, not the traditional 500 that royal matings usually required, but a more intimate gathering of about 100 wolves. Pack leaders, council members, the Elite Six, Dr. Lena, and representatives from allied territories. Rowan wore a dress the Queen Mother had commissioned specifically for the occasion, deep forest green cut to honor traditional mating ceremony styles while still allowing freedom of movement. The Order of the Silver Star hung around her neck, the sapphires catching the light. Her silver-gray hair, the same color as her wolf form, had been left loose, falling past her shoulders in waves. Astrid served as flower girl, wearing a pale blue dress and carrying a basket of mountain wildflowers. She took her role seriously, scattering petals along the aisle with careful precision, her face scrunched in concentration. Theron waited at the front of the hall wearing formal regalia that somehow made him look even more imposing than usual. But when his eyes found Rowan, everything else faded. There was only that look, the one that said he witnessed her, really witnessed her, and chose her anyway. The ceremony itself was traditional. The Queen Mother presided, speaking the ancient words in the old language that predated modern pack structures. Rowan and Theron exchanged vows, their hands clasped blood, mingling from shallow cuts on their palms to seal the bond. When Theron spoke his vows, his voice rang clear through the hall. I promise to witness you, always, not as Omega or Guardian or Hero, but as Rowan, the woman who changed everything, who showed me that strength has nothing to do with rank, who gave me back hope when I thought I'd lost it forever. Rowan's own vows came from somewhere deep and honest. I promise to protect what we've built, to fight for those who can't fight for themselves, to love you, both you and Astrid, with everything I am, to never stop being the wolf you recognized when everyone else looked through me. The Queen and Mother smiled, ancient eyes warm with approval. Then by the old laws and the new, I recognize this mating bond. Rowan Ashford, you are now Rowan Nightshade, mate to the Alpha King Guardian, to the heir member of the royal bloodline. The mating bond snapped into place like a physical thing, a golden thread connecting her heart to Theron's. Rowan gasped at the intensity of it. She could feel him now, sense his emotions as clearly as her own. Love fierce and protective. Pride. Relief. Joy. Theron pulled her into his arms and kissed her, while the assembled wolves howled their approval. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he whispered against her lips, "Mine, finally mine." "Yours," she agreed, "always." But even as they turned to face the celebrating crowd, even as Astrid rushed forward to hug them both, Rowan felt a prickle of unease. Her new senses, heightened by the mating bond, caught something wrong in the air. A scent that didn't belong. She tensed, scanning the hall. The Elite Six had already noticed, she witnessed. Cade's hand moved subtly toward his weapon. The other guards shifted position, creating a protective formation around Theron and Astrid. Then the windows exploded inward. Glass rained down as wolves crashed through the tall windows on all sides of the hall. 20 of them, maybe more, moving with coordinated precision. Rogues, blood-fang extremists, and leading them dropping through the shattered skylight in a shower of broken glass was Silas Blackthorne himself. He landed in the center of the hall, in wolf form, massive scarred eyes burning with red-tinged madness. Then he shifted to human, standing, naked among the glass shards, that jagged scar running down his face twisted in a smile. "Congratulations on your mating, Nightshade," Silas called out, his voice carrying over the chaos of screaming guests and snarling guards. "What a perfect day to take everything you love." His eyes locked on Astrid. Rowan moved without thinking, putting herself between the cub and the rogue leader. "You want her, you go through me. Again." "Oh, I remember you." Silas's smile widened. "The Omega who wouldn't fall down. I've thought about you a lot these past weeks. Wondered what makes a wolf like you throw herself on blades for someone else's child." He started walking toward him, casual, like he had all the time in the world. "Figured it out eventually. You're broken inside, looking for purpose, trying to prove you were worth something." "You're wrong." Rowan's voice was steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "I know exactly what I'm worth. You're the one who's broken, Silas. Destroyed by grief and hatred until there's nothing left but revenge." Around them, the hall had descended into chaos. The Elite Six engaged the rogue attackers, their training evident in every precise movement. Guests scrambled for exits or shifted to wolf form to fight. But Rowan's entire focus remained on Silas and the cub behind her. "Give me the girl," Silas said, still advancing, "and I'll let the rest of you live. You have my word." "Your word means nothing." Theron appeared beside Rowan, moving with that liquid grace that marked dominant alphas. "You attacked a neutral market, targeted a child, broke every law that keeps our society from collapsing into chaos." "You broke my world first," Silas roared, his control finally cracking. "You killed my mate, hunted her down like an animal, and executed her for the crime of believing the old ways were better." "She murdered 6 civilians in a convoy ambush," Theron shot back, "including 2 children. We didn't execute her, we stopped her from killing more innocents. There's a difference." "Not to me." Silas lunged, but he didn't go for Theron. He went for the gap beside him, trying to reach around to where Astrid stood. The same move he'd tried in the market. The move that had earned Rowan her 8th blade. This time she was ready. Rowan shifted mid-movement, her silver-gray wolf form exploding into existence. She was smaller than Silas's wolf, but faster, so much faster. She hit him from the side, driving him away from Astrid, teeth snapping for his throat. They went down in a tangle of fur and claws and snapping jaws. Silas was stronger, his weight advantage significant, but Rowan fought with strategy rather than brute force. She used his momentum against him, rolled with his attacks rather than trying to block them. Head-on went for vulnerable points. Eyes, throat, the soft underbelly. She felt claws rake across her shoulder, pain bright and immediate. Felt teeth catch her left hind leg, trying to cripple her. But her heart kept beating steady and strong, the valve holding firm even under the extreme stress of combat shifting. Dr. Lena had been right. She was healed, whole. Rowan broke away from the grapple, circled, looked for an opening. Around them, the Elite Six were systematically taking down rogues. Cade had 2 pinned his blade at their throats. The other guards worked in coordinated pairs, their training obvious in every movement. But Silas was hers. This wolf who'd tried to kill Astrid, who'd forced Rowan to take 9 blades, who'd brought violence and death to what should have been a celebration of love and new beginnings. This was her fight to finish. Silas charged again, and this time Rowan didn't dodge. She met him head-on, smaller body driving upward, teeth finding purchase in his throat. Not a killing bite, not yet, but enough to make him feel it. Enough to show him she wasn't the desperate, injured Omega from the market anymore. She was a guardian, a mate to the Alpha King, a wolf who'd been tested by fire and proven herself in blood. Silas tried to shake her off, but Rowan held firm. Her jaws tightened, feeling his pulse flutter against her tongue. One good bite and she could end this. End him. Make sure he never threatened Astrid again. But then she remembered Astrid's question from the night before. "Are you scared?" In her own response, "A little. But I'm also excited." This wasn't excitement. This was fear and anger, and the dark satisfaction of having an enemy helpless beneath her. This was becoming exactly what Silas had become, so consumed by the need for vengeance that nothing else mattered. Rowan released her grip, backed away. Around them, the fighting had stopped. The rogues were subdued or dead, the Elite Six standing guard over the survivors. The hall had gone quiet except for the heavy breathing of wolves and the whimpers of the injured. Silas shifted back to human form, blood running from the wound on his neck. He stared at her, confusion clear in his eyes. "Why didn't you kill me?" "Because someone has to break the cycle," Rowan said, shifting back to human herself. She was aware of her nakedness, of the blood covering her from the fight, of the 300 witnesses watching this moment. But none of that mattered. You lost someone you love. I understand that pain. But killing me won't bring her back. Killing Astrid won't make you feel better. It'll just create more grief, more loss, more wolves, like you consumed by hatred. Then what would you have me do? The question came out broken, and for the first time, Silas sounded less like a dangerous rogue leader and more like a wolf who'd lost everything. Liv. Rowan walked closer, careful to keep herself between him and Astrid, but no longer in an aggressive stance. Face trial for what you've done. Accept the consequences. And maybe eventually find a way to honor your mate's memory that doesn't involve murdering children. Theron moved to stand beside her, passing her his shirt to cover herself. His hand found hers, their mating bond thrumming with shared emotion, pride, love, relief. Silas Blackthorne. Theron said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. You are under arrest for terrorism, attempted murder, and violation of neutral territory laws. You'll stand trial before the Northern Council. If you cooperate, testify against the remaining Bloodfang organization, help us dismantle the network you've built. I'll recommend life imprisonment rather than execution. Why? Silas's voice was raw. Why show me mercy? Because my mate asked me to. Theron looked at Rowan, and the love in his eyes made her chest tight. And she's proven herself wiser than most wolves I know. If she thinks you deserve a chance to choose a different path, then I'm willing to honor that. The Elite Six moved in, binding Silas and the surviving rogues with silver chains that would suppress their ability to shift. Guests began emerging from hiding, murmuring among themselves about what they'd witnessed. Dr. Lena was already moving through the hall, assessing injuries, directing her medical staff. Astrid appeared at Rowan's side, eyes wide. You didn't kill him. No, sweetheart, I didn't. Why not? He tried to hurt us. Rowan knelt down so she was eye level with the cub. Because killing should always be the last choice, not the first. We're stronger than him. We won. That's enough. Astrid thought about this, her young face serious. Then she nodded. Okay, I think that's brave too. A different kind of brave. Exactly right. The trial took place 1 week later in the Great Hall, which had been repaired and reinforced after the attack. Silas stood before the Northern Council bound in silver, facing representatives from every pack in the Alliance. The charges were read: terrorism, attempted murder, conspiracy, violation of neutral territory, laws, assault on the royal bloodline. The evidence was overwhelming. Witnesses from the market attack, security footage from the ceremony, testimony from captured rogues who'd turned on their leader in exchange for lighter sentences. But Silas didn't deny anything. Instead, he did something unexpected. He testified, gave names, locations, detailed information about Bloodfang operations across the Northern Territories, safe houses where weapons were stored, communication networks they'd used to coordinate attacks, plans for future operations that had been in development. Why are you cooperating? Elder Helena asked, her sharp eyes studying him. You could have stayed silent, made us work for this information. Because that Omega was right. Silas looked directly at Rowan, where she sat beside Theron in the front row. I've spent 3 years consumed by hatred. It didn't bring my mate back. It didn't make me feel better. It just made me into something she would have hated. His voice cracked. I can't undo what I've done, but maybe I can stop others from making the same mistake. The council deliberated for 2 hours. When they returned, their verdict was unanimous, guilty on all charges. The sentence, life imprisonment in the Northern Territory's maximum security facility with the possibility of parole after 20 years, if he continued to cooperate and show genuine rehabilitation. As the guards led him away, Silas paused beside Rowan. Thank you, he said quietly, for showing mercy when I didn't deserve it. Everyone deserves the chance to choose a better path, Rowan replied. Whether you take that chance is up to you. The weeks following the trial passed in a blur of recovery and reorganization. The Bloodfang network was systematically dismantled using the information Silas had provided. 43 rogues were arrested. 3 safe houses were raided, yielding enough weapons and explosives to supply a small army. The threat that had hung over the Northern Territories for years was finally decisively ended. Rowan threw herself into her duties as Astrid's guardian and Theron's mate. She trained daily with the Elite Six, her skills improving rapidly now that her heart was fully healed. She attended council meetings, learning the complex political landscape of interpack relations. She started a project she'd been thinking about since the trial, a combat training program for Omegas who wanted to learn self-defense, but had been denied access to traditional warrior training. I want to call it the Northern Omega Defense Academy, she told Theron one evening as they reviewed her proposal. Open to any Omega from any pack in the Alliance. Free instruction from volunteer teachers. I've already got Kate on board, and 2 other Elite Six members said they'd help. Theron looked over the detailed curriculum she drafted. This is ambitious. You're talking about fundamentally changing how Omegas are perceived in our society. Is that a no? That's a yes. He pulled her into his lap, kissing her soundly. I'm in awe of you. You know that, right? You went from background noise to revolutionary in the span of 2 months. I just want other wolves to have the chances I didn't. To not spend years being told they're not good enough when they just need someone to believe in them. The academy opened 6 weeks after the mating ceremony. The first class had 25 students ranging in age from 16 to 48. Wolves who'd been denied guard training for various reasons, health conditions, age pack politics. Rowan taught them everything she'd learned: how to fight without shifting, how to use an opponent's size against them, how to turn everyday objects into weapons, how to assess threats and protect others. 3 other packs, including Silverwood, requested permission to send students. Alpha Warren himself appeared at Nightfall Keep to discuss the program. "I was wrong about you," he said, meeting Rowan in Theron's office. "Wrong to reject your guard application. Wrong to assume you couldn't contribute just because of a medical condition. You've proven that and more." Rowan studied her uncle, this wolf who'd shaped so much of her early life through his rejection. "You were doing what you thought was right. Protecting me. I understand that now. Still, I'm sorry, and I'd like to make amends by supporting your academy. Silverwood will send 5 students to your next class and provide funding for training equipment." "I appreciate that." Rowan kept her voice neutral. She'd moved past needing his approval, but she wouldn't reject genuine support. "But understand, this isn't about Silverwood looking good. It's about giving Omegas real opportunities." "I know, that's why I'm doing it." 4 months after the mating ceremony, Rowan stood in the academy training yard watching her first graduating class demonstrate their skills. 25 students who'd entered uncertain and been told their whole lives they weren't strong enough. Now they moved with confidence, executing complex defensive maneuvers, working in teams protecting simulated civilians from simulated threats. Astrid sat on the fence beside Theron, watching with rapt attention. "When I'm older, can I train there too?" she asked. "You're the heir," Theron replied. "You'll have private tutors, the best training available. But I want to train with the other Omegas. Learn what Rowan teaches." Theron looked at Rowan, one eyebrow raised. She smiled. "I think that could be arranged in a few years when you're old enough." After the demonstration ended and the students dispersed, Dr. Lena approached with a tablet in hand. "I have your latest test results." Her pulse skipped. She'd been feeling off lately, tired, occasionally nauseous, her sense of smell even more acute than usual. She'd suspected but hadn't let herself hope. "You're pregnant," Dr. Lena confirmed, smile warm. "About 6 weeks along. The baby's healthy. Strong heartbeat. No complications." Rowan's hand went to her still flat stomach. A baby. She was going to have Theron's child. Astrid was going to be a big sister. "You're sure?" Her voice came out shaky. "With my medical history, your heart is completely healed. There's no reason you can't carry to term safely. I'll want to monitor you closely, but I expect a normal pregnancy." Dr. Lena squeezed her shoulder. "Congratulations, Rowan." That night, after Astrid had been put to bed, Rowan told Theron. They were in their private quarters, the rooms they now shared as mates, with windows overlooking the mountains. "I'm pregnant." Theron went very still. Then he crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms. "You're sure?" Dr. Lena confirmed. 6 weeks, due in about 7 months. He kissed her deep and fierce and full of joy. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright. "We're having a baby. Astrid's going to have a sibling." "Are you happy?" Rowan asked, needing to hear it. Happy doesn't begin to cover it. Terrified, yes, but mostly just... He placed his hand over her stomach palm, warm through her shirt. "Grateful. For you. For this. For the family we're building." 6 months later, Rowan stood in the academy training yard again, this time visibly pregnant, at 7 months, teaching advanced combat techniques to her second class of students. 50 students this time. Word had spread about the program's success, and wolves from across the territories wanted to participate. She'd modified her teaching methods to accommodate her changing body, focusing more on theory and demonstration, while having senior students from the first class handle the physical sparring. But she still showed up every day, still poured her energy into making sure these wolves had the chances she'd been denied. The graduation ceremony for the first class had been a formal affair, attended by pack leaders and council members. 12 of the 25 graduates had received offers to join pack guards in various territories. 3 had been recruited by the Elite Six as support staff with paths to full membership. The rest had returned to their packs with new skills and new confidence. The statistics spoke for themselves. Territories with trained Omegas in security roles showed a 42% decrease in successful attacks against civilians. The Northern Alliance was safer, stronger, more unified than it had been in generations. Astrid, nearly 7 years old now, had become the Academy's unofficial mascot. She attended demonstrations, cheered for students, and constantly pestered Rowan about when she'd be old enough to train officially. 2 more years, Rowan reminded her for the 100th time. "When you're 9.5, you can start the junior program." "That's forever," Astrid groaned. "It'll go faster than you think." 1 year after the mating ceremony, Rowan went into labor 3 weeks early. Dr. Lena assured everyone this was normal, nothing to worry about, but Theron paced the medical wing like a caged wolf until their son finally arrived. Ash Nightshade came into the world screaming, healthy and strong, with his father's dark hair and his mother's gray eyes. Rowan held him, exhausted and overwhelmed, and more in love than she'd known was possible. Astrid met her new brother the next day, climbing carefully onto the bed to peer at the small bundle in Rowan's arms. "He's so tiny." "You were this tiny once," Theron said, sitting beside them. "Can I hold him?" Rowan carefully transferred the baby to Astrid's arms, supporting his head, showing her how to cradle him properly. Astrid's face went soft with wonder. "Hi, Ash," she whispered. "I'm your big sister. I'm going to teach you everything I know. And when you're big enough, Mama Rowan will teach you to fight. You're going to be so strong." Tears stung Rowan's eyes. She didn't bother hiding them. A year ago, she'd been overlooked, convinced she'd never matter to anyone. Now she sat surrounded by family, her mate, her daughter, her son, at the center of a life she'd never imagined could be hers. 2 years after the mating ceremony on the anniversary of the market attack that had changed everything, Rowan stood at the memorial stone in Crossroads Market. The stone bore 8 names wolves who'd died in various Bloodfang attacks over the years, including Elara Nightshade. Theron stood beside her, one hand holding Astrid's, the other supporting 18-month-old Ash on his hip. They'd made this pilgrimage together, a family honoring the past while celebrating how far they'd come. Mama Elara, Astrid said softly, touching the carved name. And Mama Rowan. She looked between the stone and Rowan. Both heroes. Your first mama would be very proud of you, Rowan said, crouching down to Astrid's level. You've grown so much, become so brave and kind. A young Omega approached hesitantly. She couldn't have been more than 19 with nervous eyes and hunched shoulders that spoke of someone used to making themselves small. Excuse me, she said. Are you Rowan Nightshade, the one who started the Defense Academy? I am. The girl's face transformed with relief and hope. I just got accepted to your program. I start next month. I wanted to say thank you. I've spent my whole life being told I'm not strong enough to protect anyone. Your academy, what you're doing, it means everything to wolves like me. It means we're not overlooked anymore. Tears pricked Rowan's eyes. She took the girl's hand. You were never invisible. The world just wasn't looking. But it's looking now. After the girl left, Theron pulled Rowan close. Ash grabbed a fistful of her hair, babbling happily. Astrid wrapped her arms around both their legs in an enthusiastic hug. You changed the world, Theron murmured into Rowan's ear. One blade wound at a time, one student at a time, one wolf brave enough to stand when everyone said she should fall. Rowan looked at the memorial stone, then at her family, then at the market around them. Wolves from a dozen territories trading peacefully, children playing without fear, Omegas walking with their heads held high instead of hunched in defensive postures. She thought about the girl she'd been rejected and dismissed, scrubbing floors while dreaming of a purpose that seemed impossible. She thought about the 8 blades she'd taken, each one a choice to stand rather than flee. She thought about waking up surrounded by wolves who recognized her worth when she'd stopped recognizing it herself. I took 8 blades for a child I didn't know, she said quietly, and woke to find a pack of wolves at my bed, not as guards keeping watch over an injured Omega, as family, as witnesses to my worth, as proof that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is just refuse to fall even when every wound tells you that you should. Theron kissed her temple. Astrid squeezed tighter. Ash laughed and grabbed her nose with sticky fingers. No regrets, Theron asked. Rowan looked at everything she'd built, everything she'd become, everyone she'd saved and taught and inspired. She thought about overlooked Omegas across the territories who were learning they could be warriors, about rogues who'd been given second chances instead of executions, about a little girl who felt safe enough to laugh and dream because someone had shown her that protection didn't require perfection. Not even one, she said. And in that moment, standing at a memorial to the dead, while surrounded by the life she'd fought for Rowan Nightshade, former cleaner guardian of the air mate to the Alpha King mother-teacher survivor, finally allowed herself to believe what everyone else had been trying to tell her for 2 years. She was enough. She'd always been enough. The wounds had just helped her prove it. Behind them, the sun set over Crossroads Market, painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple. Wolves from a dozen packs moved through the stalls in peace. Young Omegas walked with their heads high. Somewhere in the Northern Territory, students were training at her academy, learning they could be strong. The world kept turning, the peace held. And the overlooked Omega who'd refused to fall had become the legend who taught an entire generation that worth had nothing to do with rank and everything to do with the choices you made when no one was watching. Rowan had taken 8 blades for a stranger's child. She'd woken to find wolves at her bed and a king who recognized her as his equal. She'd built an academy, raised a daughter, given birth to a son, and changed the fundamental structure of Northern Wolf Society. She'd proven over and over in blood and sacrifice and stubborn refusal to accept what everyone said was impossible, that sometimes the straightest path isn't the right one. Sometimes you have to bleed to show the world you're worth the fight. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, the world bleeds with you and becomes something better for it.